I put on my earrings slowly that morning, the small pearl ones my husband gave me on our 35th anniversary. He had been gone 4 years now, but I still wore them on days that mattered, and my son's graduation day mattered more than almost anything I could think of. My son, I'll call him Daniel, had spent 6 years working toward his medical degree. 6 years of late nights, borrowed money, cold dinners I'd leave on his doorstep when he was too buried in textbooks to drive home. He was 32 years old, and he had earned every single letter behind his name. I was so proud of him, I could barely breathe. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom and smoothed my blue dress. I had bought it 2 weeks before specifically for this day. A deep navy, structured at the shoulders, the kind of dress that says I raised a doctor without having to say a word. I wanted to look right. I wanted everything about that day to be right. It almost was. I heard the car pull into the driveway at 9:15. That was Raymond, our family's driver. Well, he had been our family's driver for 11 years, back when my husband was still alive, and we needed someone reliable. After my husband passed, I kept Raymond on. Not because I couldn't drive myself, but because he had become something closer to family. He knew where everything was. He knew when to talk and when to be quiet. He had driven Daniel to his first day of college orientation, and now he was here to drive us both to the ceremony. I grabbed my purse, took one last look in the mirror, and walked out the front door feeling like a woman who had done something right in this world. Raymond was standing beside the car, not sitting inside, not fiddling with his phone. Standing. Watching my front door with an expression I did not recognize on his face. Raymond was a calm man by nature, unhurried, steady, the kind of person who makes you feel like the world is still manageable. But that morning, he looked like a man holding something heavy inside his chest. "Good morning, Raymond," I said. He didn't smile back. He glanced past me toward the street, then back at me, then toward the street again. "Ma'am," he said quietly, and his voice had a strange tightness in it. "I need you to trust me right now. I need you to get into the back seat and stay down. Don't sit up. Don't let anyone see you through the windows." I stared at him. "Raymond, what on earth?" "Please." He said it so gently but with such weight. "I will explain everything, but right now, I need you to do this. I think Daniel may be in serious trouble." My son's name changed something in me immediately. I didn't ask another question. I got in the back seat, and Raymond draped his old gray driving jacket over my lap, not over my head like some kind of kidnapping, just enough so that if anyone glanced in, they'd see a bundle of fabric, not a face. Then he got behind the wheel and pulled slowly out of my driveway. "Where are we going?" I whispered. "To her apartment first," he said. "She doesn't know I picked you up early." Her apartment, that was Melissa. Daniel's girlfriend of 2 years, the woman he had announced just 3 weeks ago over Sunday dinner he intended to marry. The woman who had sat at my kitchen table with a warm smile, who had admired my curtains and asked for my cornbread recipe, who had held my hand and said, "I already think of you as my family." I had liked her. I want to be honest about that, because what came next would be easier to understand if I had always had a bad feeling. But I hadn't. I had liked Melissa quite a bit. "Raymond," I said from the back seat, keeping my voice low even though we were already 2 blocks from my house. "Tell me what is happening." He exhaled, long and slow. 3 days ago," he said. "I was waiting outside the restaurant where Daniel took her to dinner. You remember? He asked me to drive them. And while I was waiting, a man came out of the restaurant. He wasn't with their group. He came out and stood by the door, and he was on his phone, and he was upset, and he wasn't trying to hide it. Raymond paused. He checked his mirrors. He was saying her name. Melissa. He said it more than once. And he said, "Ma'am?" He said, "She promised she was ending it. She promised she was coming home after this." And then he said something about his daughter. About picking up their daughter from school on Friday because Melissa had said she would and she hadn't shown up. The car was very quiet. "Their daughter," I repeated. "Yes, ma'am." I sat with that for a moment. It didn't arrange itself into anything comfortable. "You think she's married?" I said. "I don't know what she is," Raymond said carefully. "But I made some calls. I have a cousin who does skip tracing, finding people, background work, that kind of thing. I gave him her full name and the county she told Daniel she grew up in. It took him 2 days. Yeah." Raymond reached over to the passenger seat and lifted a manila envelope without turning around, holding it back toward me. "It's in there. I didn't know how to bring it to you. I didn't know if I was wrong. But today, with the ceremony and Daniel talking about proposing at the dinner tonight, I couldn't wait anymore." My hands were shaking, but I opened the envelope. There were printed pages inside. Public records, my cousin's notes, 2 photographs. One was a marriage certificate. County of Shelby, Tennessee. A marriage between a woman named Melissa Ann Carver and a man named Thomas Hugh Braddock. Date of marriage, 9 years ago. The second photograph was a family photo, the kind you get done at one of those portrait studios, everyone in coordinating colors. Melissa, younger but unmistakably herself, sitting beside a man I didn't know, with a little girl on her lap who looked about 5 or 6 years old, all of them smiling. At the bottom of the page, my cousin's handwriting. No record of divorce filing in Shelby County or any adjacent county. Still legally married as of this search. I placed the pages carefully back inside the envelope. I did not cry. I wanted to, but I didn't. "She has a child," I said. "Yes, ma'am, a daughter. Her name appears to be Gracie. She'd be about 8 or 9 now." An 8-year-old girl, with a mother who had spent 2 years building a second life 2 states away, attending my son's medical school events, eating at my table, accepting a promise of marriage. "Does Daniel know any of this?" "No, ma'am. I'm certain he doesn't." "Why are we going to her apartment?" Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because last night, after I got the documents from my cousin, I drove past her building, and there was a car out front I didn't recognize. A Tennessee plate. It was still there this morning when I came by before picking you up." He paused. "I think her husband may have come here. I think something is happening that we don't understand yet, and I think you need to see it before Daniel gets to that ceremony and says something in front of 400 people that he can't take back." We turned onto a tree-lined street in a part of the city that was quiet on weekend mornings. Melissa's building was a 3-story brick complex with a small parking lot. Raymond pulled to the far end of the lot, close to a row of hedges, and cut the engine. "Stay low," he said. "I'm going to step out and stand by the car. If anyone looks over, I'm just a driver waiting. But I need you to watch the front entrance." He got out. I shifted slowly to the side of the seat closest to the building and looked through the window gap between the doorframe and Raymond's jacket, which was still draped partially over the seat beside me. I waited. For 11 minutes, nothing happened. I know because I watched the clock on my phone with the kind of rigid focus that comes when you are trying very hard not to think. Then the front door of the building opened. Melissa came out first. She was dressed beautifully. I will give her that. A pale rose dress, her hair done, heels that clicked on the concrete steps. She looked like a woman prepared for a celebration. She looked like someone who belonged on the arm of a man receiving his medical degree. Behind her came a man I had never seen. Tall, heavy-set, in a blue button-down shirt that was wrinkled like he had slept in it. He caught up to her at the bottom of the steps and grabbed her arm. Not violently, but firmly. The way someone grabs a person they know well when they are past the point of polite conversation. I could not hear them, but I could see. Melissa pulled her arm back. She said something sharp and short. He responded, and his face was not the face of a stranger. It was the face of a man who had been in pain for a long time and had finally driven a long way to say so. He reached into his shirt pocket and held something out to her. She looked at it, then looked away. He kept talking. She kept not looking at him. Then she turned away from him entirely, straightened her dress, and walked to her car without another word. He stood in the parking lot and watched her go. His shoulders dropped. He put whatever was in his hand back in his pocket. He stood there for another moment, and then he walked back inside the building. I sat up slowly in the back seat. Raymond got back in the car. Neither of us said anything for a moment. "That was him," I said, not a question. "I believe so." "She just walked away from him." "Yes, ma'am." I looked down at the envelope in my lap. Then I looked at the entrance to the building where that man had gone back inside, alone, in a wrinkled shirt, having driven however many hours from Tennessee to say something to his wife that she refused to hear. "She has an 8-year-old daughter," I said again. I think I needed to keep saying it because it kept meaning more each time. "Yes." "And my son is going to walk across a stage today, and then tonight at dinner, he is going to pull out a ring." Raymond's jaw tightened slightly. "That's what he told me when I drove him last week. He asked me to bring the car around to the restaurant at 8 because he wanted everything to be... He said he wanted it to be right. He wanted it to be right. My husband should have been here. Not because I couldn't handle this, but because it would have hurt less to hold with 2 people than with one." I pressed my hand flat against my knee and made myself breathe evenly. "Take me to the ceremony," I said. And call my daughter-in-law." "No, call my daughter. Tell her to meet me outside the venue before it starts. Don't tell her why. Just tell her I need her." Raymond nodded and started the car. My daughter, Daniel's younger sister Renee, was waiting for me on the steps of the Civic Auditorium when we arrived. She had her husband's arm and a confused expression that turned sharp when she saw my face. "Mom, what happened?" I handed her the envelope. She read it right there on the steps, her husband reading over her shoulder. I watched her face move through the same stations mine had traveled. Confusion, disbelief, understanding, fury. "She's still married," Renee said flatly. "Yes." "And Daniel doesn't know?" "No." "We have to tell him before he goes in there." "I know. I need you to find him. He won't be seated yet. He'll be with the other graduates in the back. Don't make a scene. Just bring him to me. Zia." Renee handed the envelope back to me, straightened her posture, and walked with the specific kind of calm that only a woman who is very angry can produce. Her husband stayed beside me on the steps. I stood there in my navy dress with my pearl earrings and my husband's absence and that envelope in my hands, and I looked at the families streaming into the auditorium, parents with bouquets, grandparents with video cameras, children in stiff church clothes. And I thought about all the things you don't know when you think you know someone. All the rooms in a person you've never been invited into. Renee came back in 8 minutes with Daniel behind her. My son is tall, like his father was. He had his graduation gown on over his dress shirt, the hood draped around his neck, and when he came around the corner and saw my face, his own face changed immediately. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Come here, sweetheart." I took him by the arm and walked him several steps away from the crowd, to a quieter corner by the building's side wall. Renee stayed close but gave us space. "I need to show you something," I said. "And I need you to let me finish before you say anything, because what I'm about to show you is real. And I need you to believe me. And I need you to know that I am so sorry to do this today of all days." He looked at the envelope. He looked at my face. Then he nodded, slowly. I told him everything. About Raymond and the restaurant. About the 3 days of searching. About the man in the parking lot and his wrinkled shirt and what it looked like when a husband watches his wife walk away from him and gets back in an elevator alone. I handed him the marriage certificate. He held it in both hands and read it twice. The second time, something in his face went completely still, the way water goes still right before a deep cold sets in. "Gracie," he said. He said the name like he'd heard it before. "Yes." She mentioned a niece. She said she had a niece named Gracie who lived with her sister in Memphis. He put the paper down. "There is no sister." "No," I said. "There isn't." Daniel was quiet for a long time, long enough that I put my hand on his arm and he didn't pull away, and that meant more to me than I can explain. "She was going to let me do it tonight," he said, not really to me. "She knew I had the ring. I told her. She knew, and she was going to sit there and let me." His voice stopped. "You don't have to do anything today except walk across that stage," I said. "You have worked for 6 years for this day, and it belongs to you. Whatever happens with Melissa, and I will help you through every bit of it, but this moment, this diploma, this is yours. That doesn't change." He looked at me. His father's eyes. His father's way of going quiet when something lands hard. "What do I do about her?" he asked. "She's already inside. She's in the family seating." "You don't do anything today. You walk. You receive your degree. You shake the dean's hand, and then you come home with me for dinner. Not the restaurant, home. And we figure out the next steps together as a family. And tonight, the ring? The ring stays in your pocket," I said. He nodded. He folded the marriage certificate carefully and put it in the inner pocket of his graduation gown, against his chest. And something about that detail, the paper folded and pressed against his heart, almost broke me. "Does she know you know?" he asked. "No." "Good." He exhaled. "Okay, good." He hugged me then, right there against the side wall of the civic auditorium, his graduation hood brushing my cheek and his arms around my shoulders the way they had been when he was 9 years old and his bicycle slipped on gravel, and I was the one who got there first. "I love you, Mom," he said. "I love you more than you'll ever understand," I said back. He went inside to find his place in the procession. I smoothed my dress and took a breath and walked through the front doors with Renee at my side. Melissa was already seated in the family section, 3rd row, wearing her pale rose dress. She smiled and waved when she saw me come in. I smiled back. Not because I am a dishonest woman, but because I had learned by then that some things are better handled quietly and in the right order. And this was not her moment to be confronted. This was my son's moment to be celebrated. I sat 2 rows behind her and watched my son walk across that stage. When they called his name, Dr. Daniel Mercer, I pressed both hands to my face and cried in the way you cry when something is both the most beautiful and the most painful thing happening at the same time. Renee held my arm. Her husband clapped. Raymond, who had been allowed inside and sat in the back, stood up. Daniel walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, held up his diploma, and looked out into the audience until he found my face. He gave me one small nod. I gave him one back. That was enough. After the ceremony, I asked Renee to stay close to Melissa in the courtyard while I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a family attorney I had used for my husband's estate, a woman I trusted completely. I explained what I had. She told me what options Daniel had and what to document and what not to say until we were ready to move carefully. The second call was to Raymond, who was already in the car and waiting. "There's one more thing," Raymond said before I could speak. "What?" "The man from Tennessee. He called me this morning, before I picked you up. He found my number through the car service listing. He said he'd been following Melissa for 6 weeks. He knows about Daniel. He said he doesn't want trouble. He just wants his wife to come home or to agree to a proper divorce so he can have full custody of their daughter. He said Gracie hasn't seen her mother consistently in over a year." That 8-year-old girl came back to me again. This time, I let myself feel the full weight of her. "Give me his number," I said. I called Thomas Braddock from the parking lot of the Civic Auditorium while families celebrated around me with flowers and photographs. He answered on the second ring, and his voice was exactly what I expected. Tired and careful and real. I told him who I was. I told him my son didn't know. I told him what I had and that we intended to handle it lawfully. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Thank you," in the particular way that people say it when they have been carrying something alone for too long. "My daughter asks about her mother every single day," he said. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault." "No, but I'm still sorry." We spoke for 10 more minutes. He had documentation of his own. He had been trying to serve Melissa with divorce papers for 3 months, but she had been evading the process server by staying at Daniel's address, an address Thomas hadn't been able to locate until recently. She hadn't just been building a second life. She had been hiding inside my son's life specifically to make herself harder to find. I went back inside and found Daniel in the courtyard, still in his gown, being photographed with other graduates. Melissa stood beside him with her hand on his arm and her smile fixed perfectly in place. I stood at the edge of the crowd and watched, and I thought about what it takes to maintain a face like that. How much practice, how much compartmentalization, how much willingness to look directly at the people you are deceiving and feel nothing. I thought about Gracie. That evening, I cooked dinner at my house. I had called Daniel before they left the venue and told him to come to me, not the restaurant, just us. He understood. Melissa was not invited, though neither of us had to say that plainly. Daniel told her he needed a quiet family night before the celebrating started, and whatever she felt about that, she didn't argue. He arrived at 7. He had changed out of his gown, and he sat at my kitchen table the way he had 1,000 times before, and I put a plate in front of him and sat across from him, and we talked. Really talked, the way you can when there's no performance required. He had questions. I answered what I could and told him what I didn't know. He cried once, briefly, when we talked about the ring. Not because he had wanted to marry her so much, but because he said he felt stupid, and I told him that was the wrong word. Stupid is for mistakes you could have seen. This was a deliberate deception maintained by someone who had learned how. That is not a reflection of his intelligence. It is a reflection of her choices. He asked me what he should do. I told him what the attorney had said. I told him what Thomas Braddock had told me. I told him that the kindest thing he could do for himself, and honestly for that little girl in Tennessee, was to step back cleanly and let the legal process work the way it was designed to. He asked about Gracie. I told him what I knew. He sat quietly for a long moment and then said, "That poor kid. She didn't do anything. He's going to be a good doctor. He was already a good man." Those things were never in question. Melissa was served with papers 4 days later. Divorce proceedings initiated by Thomas Braddock, and a separate civil matter that the attorney helped Daniel initiate regarding the fraudulent use of his address. She called Daniel twice that first day. He didn't answer. She called me once, and I answered, and I said very calmly and without drama, "My son isn't available. Please don't call this number again." And then I hung up. She did not call back. Gracie, I'm told, through Raymond, who kept in touch with Thomas for a while after, started seeing her school counselor regularly and is doing better. Thomas got primary custody. He sounds like a man who means to do right by his daughter, and sometimes that has to be enough to hope for when you can't do more. Daniel threw himself back into work, which is what he does when something hurts. He took extra shifts. He called me every Sunday without me having to ask. He came for dinner on alternating Fridays. He did not say much about Melissa after the first week, and I did not bring her up, because some things heal faster when they are not constantly reopened. On the first Sunday of the following month, he called and said, "Mom, I need you to know something." "What is it?" "That day, at the ceremony, I was so angry, and then I don't even have a word for it. But when I walked across that stage, and I looked out, and I saw your face, I thought, whatever else is wrong, she's there. She came. She found out, and she handled it the right way, and she's still there." He paused. "I just wanted you to know that I noticed." I held the phone for a moment without speaking. "Your father would have been so proud of you," I finally said. "I know," he said. "I think about that a lot." We stayed on the phone a little while longer, not saying anything particularly important, just being there in the comfortable quiet of people who don't need to perform anything for each other. Outside my window, the afternoon was the kind of warm and still that makes you feel like the world is capable of being decent. I still had on my pearl earrings from the ceremony. I had been putting them back on in the mornings, I realized, more often than I used to. Maybe because some days you need a reminder of what 35 good years looks like. What it means to have been chosen well and to have chosen well in return. And maybe because on the days when everything feels uncertain, you reach for the things that have already proven themselves. The small, certain things, the ones that were always real,